I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators.
I want to highlight what Jasmine Crockett, the ranking member of the subcommittee, mentioned recently. She kicked things off by dropping a surprising news alert saying Joe Biden isn't president anymore. It seems like it's time to move past the old discussions and focus on what's happening now. She reminded everyone that these aren't the good old days, like when grandparents used to share stories about the past. We really need to concentrate on how to legislate effectively, because it seems some folks have lost sight of what we're actually supposed to do. Sure, we're in judiciary, but our role is to write laws, not throw our own trials and figure out what's true or who deserves to be sued.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
Now, let's talk about the latest big scandal that's just exploded. This is happening on February 2nd, 2026. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was appointed by Trump to oversee the release of the Epstein files, is now caught up in a significant cover-up. She promised that these files would reveal the truth about the Epstein scandal. But now it turns out she's been using heavy redactions to hide information both about herself and Trump.
Members of Congress will be able to view unredacted copies of the Epstein files starting Monday. That, according to two sources familiar with the plans. And it comes after calls from some lawmakers and survivors for more transparency and accountability in the investigations related to Epstein.
Congress is furious about this whole situation. The courts are stepping in and demanding rapid reviews. Watchdog groups are filing lawsuits, and it's becoming clear that the entire process of releasing these files has been manipulated to shield Trump and Bondi rather than expose the truth and protect the victims.
That a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong.
And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Now, back to what was said by that good senator from New Jersey yesterday. So it all started when Bondi was breaking this record for holding the floor, a record that had previously been held by another racist. As she was doing that, she made this bold statement about how it shouldn't be about left versus right, but rather about right versus wrong. Honestly, I think it's high time we focused on what's truly right instead of getting lost in party politics.
Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims, 200. So we have over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
Now, here's the scoop. Bondi jumped on Fox News to really hype up the release of the Epstein files. She told John Roberts that there was this supposed client list just sitting on her desk, claiming that Trump had told her to finally get these files out there. She made it sound like she was diving deep into these explosive documents and names, ready to dish out the big truth about the Epstein scandal. And you could feel the excitement from the public. Everyone was thinking that at last we were about to uncover the truth, see who was really involved with Epstein and get to the bottom of it all. But then the files dropped. And what a letdown they were. They were heavily redacted with whole pages completely blacked out. It looked like someone had taken a can of black ink to them. When folks tried to figure out what was under those redactions, they realized that Bondi had actually redacted information about herself. She not only hid her own involvement, but also covered up stuff that went against her public statements. It wasn't just a little exaggeration either. She straight up fabricated claims about what was supposed to be in those files. Bondi went so far as to claim there were tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with child pornography, a very specific and outrageous number. But according to internal Department of Justice memos that have come to light, that claim was completely fabricated or blown way out of proportion. The truth is, there were no tens of thousands of child abuse videos. She fed the public lies about what those files contained. And when the real numbers finally surfaced, showing that her assertions were false, Bondi and her DOJ team used those redactions to cover their tracks, literally hiding the fact that she had misled everyone. It gets even worse, though. Those internal DOJ memos revealed that Bondi understated the number of victims in her public statements. It's just pretty shocking, and it makes you lose a little more faith in political leaders. So Bondi recently claimed there were over 250 victims, but it turns out the FBI's internal findings revealed that there were actually a lot more. It feels like she purposely downplayed the number, even though she knew the truth was much higher. To keep that discrepancy under wraps, she decided to use redactions, which isn't the best look. Essentially, she leveraged her office to mislead the public regarding the actual number of victims. Now, Congress is stepping in to investigate this whole situation. Back in May 2025, Representative Dan Goldman fired off a letter to Bondi, taking her Department of Justice to task for the way they handled the Epstein files. They made a big deal about releasing everything and finally getting to the bottom of things. But the reality was that much of what came out was already known and heavily redacted. It was hardly the full story people were hoping to see. Goldman's letter pointed out how the redactions seemed aimed at protecting Donald Trump and covering up Bondi's misleading claims concerning client lists and other evidence. And guess what? The courts are now getting involved too. A federal judge has demanded that the DOJ speed up the processing of Freedom of Information Act requests related to these Epstein files. Basically, the judge is telling the government to hurry up and reveal what internal emails and memos say about who called the shots on those redactions and the reasoning behind it all. This judge is also pushing to find out if Trump's name in the files impacted the decision to withhold full information. Plus, there's scrutiny regarding whether Bondi actually misled everyone about what was included in the files. To add to the mix, progressive watchdog groups are filing lawsuits. Democracy Forward took legal action against the DOJ after they refused to fast-track the review of internal records related to the Epstein files. These organizations want to uncover if Bondi's decisions were influenced by politics. They're questioning whether she was prioritizing Trump's interests over the public's right to know, or even if she was using her role as Attorney General to hide information that could harm him. And representatives are not holding back on this either. Ayanna Pressley shared some pretty striking images on Facebook showing pages from the Epstein files that were completely blacked out. Just solid black, no information in sight. Presley remarked that Trump seems to think that fulfilling the law means just releasing documents that are essentially empty. It's quite the situation with the Epstein files. And let me tell you, Bondi's handling of it is raising eyebrows. She's been missing deadlines left and right when it comes to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Conveniently, she asked for extra time more than once, saying in January 2026 that her team still hadn't figured out what should be kept redacted. Then, in February 2026, she was back at it, asking for more time once again. Things got really heated when she had to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. During that hearing, the Democrats, led by Senator Dick Durbin, really went after her. They challenged her about the Epstein files and those pesky redactions, not to mention her somewhat misleading public statements. You could see she was feeling the pressure, getting defensive and combative. She claimed those redactions were all about protecting victims and ongoing investigations, but the senators weren't buying it. They pointed fingers, saying Bondi was hiding the juicy stuff that could embarrass her, and even contradict her statements. They accused her of misusing her office to shield Trump instead of prioritizing the public's interest. But it gets even juicier. Picture this. On February 2nd, 2026, all this drama is unfolding. At the same time, Susie Wilds is cooperating with federal investigators. It's also the moment when the Supreme Court is taking down Trump's tariffs, and Trump's approval rating is plummeting to 37%, while the Republican Party starts to splinter. Meanwhile, the Attorney General of the United States, handpicked by Trump, is getting caught using redactions to keep information about herself and possibly Trump under wraps. So I really think it's time to take a closer look at what Pam Bondi did with those Epstein files. This scandal is a huge deal, shedding light on power abuse within the Trump administration. We're not just talking about redactions. This is about politicians using their roles to protect their friends instead of working for the public good. It's pretty serious, especially when it comes to transparency around something as significant as the Epstein scandal. Let me give you a quick rundown of what went down with Bondi and the Epstein files. So, Bondi was brought in as Attorney General by Trump, who specifically asked her to release those files. He made it clear that the public needed to see what was in there, claiming it had been hidden away for too long. Bondi went along with it and said she would make sure the truth got out. During an appearance on Fox News, she even got folks excited about it, mentioning to John Roberts that she had an Epstein client list sitting right on her desk. She hinted that she was personally going through the names, dropping the idea that there were some pretty shocking figures tied to Epstein included in that list. It really seemed like Trump wanted the truth to be known, and the public was all ears, eager to find out what was hidden in those Epstein files. But then things took a turn. Bondi and her team started claiming there were tens of thousands of disturbing videos featuring Epstein with child pornography. She said she had stumbled upon all these videos, making sure to put that information out there for everyone to hear. However, internal memos from the Department of Justice that recently emerged showed a different story. They revealed that there weren't tens of thousands of videos at all. The actual number was thousands of images and videos combined, which is a far cry from what Bondi had claimed. These memos suggested that Bondi might have seriously exaggerated the contents of the files. When those internal documents pointed out that her statements were inaccurate, especially regarding the client list and those big names she hinted at, what did she do? She resorted to using redactions, covering up the memos that indicated she had misrepresented the facts. It was as if she was trying to erase her own involvement in the Epstein files altogether. So let's break down what Bondi's been up to. First off, she really downplayed the number of victims in her public statements. While she claimed there were over 250 victims, internal FBI investigations revealed that the actual number was much higher, significantly higher. But Bondi chose to stick with the lower figure, basically lowballing the truth. When this contradiction came to light in internal memos, she didn't come clean. Instead, she decided to redact those documents using black ink to cover up the reality of her misleading information. Now, this leads us to the lawsuit and subsequent court orders. In May 2025, Representative Dan Goldman from the House Judiciary Committee wrote to Bondi. He accused the Department of Justice of releasing the Epstein files with what seemed like a big dramatic reveal, claiming they were finally being transparent. However, the files that were actually released were mostly things that had already seen the light of day, heavily redacted to the point of being mostly useless for uncovering new details. Goldman pointed out that it looked like those redactions were made to shield Donald Trump and to protect Bondi from her misleading claims about what the documents contained. And you know what happened next? Watchdog groups stepped in and sued. Democracy Forward, a progressive advocacy group, took action against the DOJ for dragging its feet on FOIA requests regarding the Epstein files. They wanted to dig into the internal emails and memos that explained who was behind the redactions and why. They were curious to know if Trump's name had influenced any changes in the release plans and whether Bondi had personally approved any of those redactions that contradicted her public statements. Fortunately, a federal judge found this all compelling and ordered that the FOIA requests be processed more quickly. Essentially, the judge said the government needs to speed things up and hand over those documents. This ruling is pressing the government to reveal its internal workings regarding the redactions, potentially exposing whether they were driven by political motives and the truth behind all the secrecy. So let's talk about what happened with those pages that Representative Presley shared on Facebook. They were completely redacted with solid black blocks hiding everything. When documents look like that, it really isn't fulfilling the Freedom of Information Act. It sends a clear message. You're not looking out for the public. It seems like a cover-up, like trying to hide something rather than being open and honest. And when the Attorney General of the United States rolls out these fully blacked-out pages and claims that she's all about transparency, it's hard to see that as anything other than using her position to block justice. It gets even more interesting when we look at Bondi's pattern of blowing past deadlines set by the Epstein Files Transparency Act. She missed those deadlines, asked for extensions, and claimed her team needed more time because the redaction process was complicated. But honestly, it feels like the real reason for the delays was that Bondi and her crew were trying to figure out how to hide information about Trump without raising any red flags. They were likely trying to mask their own fabrications without revealing the game they were playing. Then, when Bondi finally faced the Senate Judiciary Committee in February 2026, she was really on the defensive. She maintained that the redactions were all about protecting victims and ongoing investigations, but the senators weren't buying it. They pointed out that she seemed to be using victim protection as a shield for her political interests, saying she was trying to bury embarrassing details and contradictions within her public statements. And they had a valid point. Now let's consider the whole issue of protecting victims versus shielding political figures. There are definitely real concerns when it comes to keeping victims' identities and privacy safe. No one wants to see sensitive material like nude photos published. The Trump Department of Justice actually made some missteps in that area. They released many nude images in previous documents and are now scrambling to remove them. So, yes, there are genuine victim protection issues at play, but Bondi's actions raise eyebrows about what she's really trying to protect. So, here's the deal with Bondi and what she's been up to. It's clear that she's been using victim protection to really cover her tracks when it comes to politically sensitive stuff about Trump and herself. She's throwing around legitimate concerns about victim safety as a way to justify overdoing the redactions, but somehow she's not really making sure victims are being protected properly. That's a definite pattern we're seeing play out. When we zoom out, this looks like part of a bigger trend with the Trump administration, a tendency to use secrecy and redactions to shield Trump and those close to him from scrutiny. Take Kash Patel, for example, who's been caught up in a whole lot of accusations regarding missing records and keeping things under wraps. The D.C. police takeover is yet another situation filled with secrecy and lost documentation. And let's not forget about ISIS crackdowns, which have barely been transparent. Then there's the Epstein Files release, touted as a big move towards transparency by Trump. Well, it's shaping up to be more of a cover-up to protect him. Let's dive into what Bondi's scandal really means for Trump, the administration, and public trust. This stuff is important. First off, it shows that Bondi isn't above abusing her power as Attorney General just to shield Trump and herself. She took the authority of her office to redact things that could make her and Trump look bad. This isn't just a minor slip. It's a huge misuse of power, using her role to protect political buddies instead of actually serving justice. Secondly, when Trump talks about wanting transparency and releasing information, what he really means is that he only wants the good stuff out there. He hyped up the release of the Epstein files, but it turns out he was only interested in the selective information that made him look decent, while keeping anything that might cast him in a negative light hidden away. Third, the whole process of releasing the Epstein files was politically motivated from the very beginning. Instead of just releasing important information for the public, it feels like there was a strategy to control what got out and what didn't. And fourth, This whole situation is bound to spark even more investigations and court actions, which means this isn't going to be ending anytime soon. With courts pushing for faster processing of Freedom of Information Act requests, we're about to see a flood of internal documents about Bondi. Judges are starting to say yes to releasing more memos, emails, and other records that might reveal even worse things than what we already know. This really puts a dent in Bondi's credibility as the Attorney General. She was meant to be the top law enforcement officer in the country, someone who upholds the law and serves justice. But instead, Bondi seems to have used her position to cover up information and shield Trump, which honestly is a significant betrayal of her role. This also ties into a broader issue where Trump administration officials have been misusing their roles for political gain. We've seen it with individuals like Tom Heyman taking bribes and Susie Wilds witnessing corruption without properly reporting it. Ethics officials getting pushed out only adds to this pattern. And now here we are with Bondi using her office to protect Trump. It's all part of the same story, and what timing this scandal for Bondi lands at the worst possible moment for Trump, as it only feeds into the ongoing narrative of corruption and cover-ups that's already making headlines. Trump is already facing legal issues, investigations, and cooperation with federal investigators. And now Bondi's redaction scandal just throws another log on the fire of corruption. It's not going to sit well with independent voters or those who care about transparency and the rule of law. People don't like cover-ups or the abuse of power, and they certainly don't want to see government officials using their authority to defend their political allies. This whole situation clearly reflects those concerns. Moreover, it validates the fears that Trump would misuse the Justice Department for his own ends. Critics have been vocal about how Trump would weaponize the DOJ and use the Attorney General to shield himself. And now Bondi's actions are proving those critics right. It's clear she's been used to cover up information for Trump. Looking ahead, this is going to be a massive issue for the midterms. Democrats are poised to capitalize on this by pointing out what Trump's Attorney General has done, highlighting how she's involved in the cover-up. They're ready to hammer Republicans on this, and it's hard to see it benefiting Trump in the long run. So there's this huge scandal involving Pam Bondi and her redactions that came to light on the 2nd of February, 2026. Basically, it reveals how she used her position to protect Trump instead of doing what's right for the public. It's a clear example of corruption and abuse of power, showing Trump using the Justice Department not to uphold justice, but to sweep information under the rug. This is going to stir up a lot of trouble, leading to more investigations and more documents surfacing. Trump's credibility is really going to take a hit because of this, adding to the growing perception of corruption and misuse of power within his administration. On that same day, all sorts of other events were unfolding too. Susie Wilds was cooperating with federal investigators. The Supreme Court was shooting down Trump's tariffs. His approval rating was plummeting to 37%, and the Republican Party was splintering with donors pulling back. This Bondi scandal is just another big piece in the puzzle that's crumbling Trump.